The scent of pine and cold midnight air hung thick in my room as servants moved nervously around me, their hands trembling while they fussed with the last details. Outside, the full moon glowed like a silver coin over the castle, washing the stone walls in pale light. From the forest came a distant chorus of howls, part celebration, part warning, that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. "Hold still, my lady," Lyra whispered, her voice thin, her fingers shaking as she fixed the silver circlet on my ash-blonde hair. She couldn't look me in the eyes, and in the mirror I caught that familiar flicker of pity everyone had worn since the announcement, since I'd been chosen as the bride of the Lycan king, a peace offering wrapped in white silk. My hand brushed the small wooden charm resting at my throat, my mother Celine's final gift before she died. The carving was faded smooth by years of worry. "Courage lives in stillness," she had told me once. "When the world howls, you stay calm at its center." I breathed around the memory, clinging to her words. "They say he's killed 100 men with his bare hands," one maid whispered behind me. "Twice that when he changes." "Hush," Lyra snapped, but it was too late. The damage was done. The reflection, staring back from the mirror, didn't look like me. My skin was pale as snow, my gray eyes wide with fear, lips pressed tight. The white gown, supposed to mean purity, felt more like a shroud. I'd never wanted this. I hadn't asked to be the one sealing peace between humans and Lycans. For centuries, our worlds had stood divided. Stone cities to the east, wild forests to the west. War had almost destroyed us both. Now peace would come through marriage, through me. A knock shattered the tense silence. The maids scattered as my father Cyrus Vale entered. The weight in his silver-streaked face said everything he didn't. "It's time, Arya," he said quietly. I stood, somehow finding the strength to keep my knees steady. "Father, tell me about him, please." He looked away. "Kyle Nightwind is complicated, fierce, unpredictable, but he's sworn you no harm. Do you believe him?" His silence answered for him. The hallways stretched endlessly as we walked, my gown whispering over the stone like secrets being traded in the dark. Guards stood at attention, faces carved from grief and discipline as they watched their lord's daughter march toward a life with a monster. I touched my mother's charm. Stillness. The great hall opened before us, a cathedral of flickering candles. Two sides faced one another, the humans in velvet and gold hiding their terror behind false smiles. The Lycans taller, wilder, their amber eyes burning under the candlelight. At the altar waiting stood the Lycan king. Kyle Nightwind was nothing like the stories. He wasn't a beast. He was devastatingly human, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair black as the forest night with streaks of silver through it. His face was cut from sharp lines in quiet danger, but it was his eyes, molten gold rimmed in darkness, that locked my breath in my throat. He watched me approach as though he could see through skin and bone straight to my heartbeat. My father's hand tightened around my arm. Whether it was to steady me or himself, I couldn't tell. The strange blend of human violins and low Lycan drums filled the hall. I stumbled once. The murmur rippled. "Steady, daughter," Cyrus whispered. "Remember who you are." Who was I? Lady Arya Vale, raised in comfort and diplomacy, groomed to smile through fear. Nothing in my quiet life had prepared me for him. At the altar, my father placed my trembling hand in Kyle's. The contact struck like lightning. His palm was rough, hot, alive. My pulse skipped, and for a heartbeat I forgot how to breathe. The first touch nearly shattered me. His skin burned against mine, rough, strong, but careful in the way he held my trembling hand. A jolt of raw electric heat shot through me, and I bit down hard to keep from gasping. "I entrust you with my daughter, Cyrus," Vale said, his steady voice carrying across the hall, layered with the grief he couldn't hide. "May this union bring peace to our people." Kyle Nightwind inclined his head, never breaking eye contact with me. "She will be protected, he said, his deep voice low enough to vibrate in my bones. She will lack for nothing, except freedom, I thought bitterly, except choice. The rest of the ceremony blurred together ancient vows, strange symbols, words that bound me to a world I didn't understand. When Kyle spoke, his tone was mesmerizing, heavy with an old cadence that didn't sound quite human. When it ended, he leaned close enough that his breath brushed my ear. "You don't have to fear me," he murmured, slipping a dark metal ring onto my finger. The stone shimmered like captured moonlight. "I'm not the monster your stories made me." Before I could answer, he lifted my hand and kissed my knuckles, courtly practiced, but the faint scrape of sharp teeth grazed my skin. A warning hidden inside a promise. The feast that followed was a cold battlefield, dressed in candlelight. Humans sat stiffly on one side, Lycans on the other, centuries of blood standing invisible between them. I sat beside Kyle on the dais, pretending to eat, tasting nothing but fear. He spoke easily with my father's advisors, trade borders, alliances, as if I weren't even there. It wasn't until my hand trembled so hard I nearly spilled my wine that he finally looked at me. His large hand covered mine, firm and grounding. "Breathe," he said softly. "Your heart's running like a trapped rabbit. I can hear it." I jerked my hand back. "Forgive me," I whispered, meeting his gaze despite myself. "It's not every day I'm handed over to a stranger I'm told not to fear." Something flickered in his golden eyes, something like humor. "There she is," he murmured. I was starting to wonder if they'd sent me a ghost instead of a wife. Before I could reply, a commotion exploded at the lower tables. A Lycan warrior stood, fury twisting his face, shouting at a human noble. "You speak of peace while wearing our dead as trophies," he snarled, his voice thick with the growl of a shifting beast. His eyes glowed amber, his teeth already sharpening. Beside me, Kyle went still as stone. The air grew heavy as he rose from his seat. "Riven," he said the name, carrying like thunder across the hall. The warrior instantly dropped his gaze, muscle still taut. "Forgive me, my king," he said, voice strained. "But this human flaunts the claws of our fallen." All eyes turned toward the offender, Jarek, one of my father's commanders. Around his neck hung a string of claws, grotesque against his polished uniform. My father's face hardened. "Lord Jarek, remove that. Now! It dishonors this night. It honors my wife and children." Jarek snapped, his tone drunk with bitterness. "I will not." He never finished. Kyle moved too fast to follow, and suddenly stood towering over the man. The hall went silent. Power radiated off him in waves, primal and cold. "You wear pieces of my people," Kyle said quietly, dangerously calm. "On the same night, I take one of yours as my queen." The implication cut like a blade. "One of yours. A trophy." My chest went cold. Jarek's hand twitched toward his sword, and I almost cried out, but Cyrus stepped forward quickly, his diplomat's tone steady. "Your Majesty, please accept our apologies. Lord Jarek will be escorted out and dealt with immediately." Kale stood, unmoving, his back to me, his silence stretching until it was almost unbearable. Then finally he nodded once, slow, controlled, lethal. Kale's expression was impossible to read. Then after a long silence, he inclined his head slightly. "See that he is," he said flatly. "The next man I find wearing the bones of my dead will lose the hand that bears them." The guards dragged Jarek from the hall. Kyle returned to his seat beside me, calm and composed on the surface, yet I could feel the restrained fury radiating from him like heat from a storm waiting to break. "Is that what happens to anyone who displeases you?" I asked quietly. "Dismemberment, death." His molten gold gaze turned toward me, sharp and unreadable. I refused to look away, though my pulse raced in my throat. "What awaits those who desecrate the dead," he said finally, "is justice." Then softer, almost intimate, "But you, wife, have nothing to fear from me." Those same words again. "You don't have to fear me." Yet what I had just witnessed, the deadly precision behind his calm, told me he was capable of violence deeper than any legend. The rest of the feast blurred together in a haze of polite conversation and hidden dread. As the candles burned lower and the music softened into slow, intimate notes, my heart pounded harder. The night was ending. I knew what came next. Servants cleared tables, their glances flicking toward us, knowing. When Kael's eyes met mine again, something in them had changed, less ice, more shadowed warmth. "Come," he said, rising to his full height. "It's time we left." The walk to the royal chambers felt like walking to my own execution. Guests and soldiers lined the corridor, some bowing, others watching with pity or curiosity. Kael's presence beside me was both a shield and a brand. Every step reminded me I belonged to him now. The royal suite wasn't the savage den I had imagined. It was beautiful. Stone walls draped in forest green tapestries shimmered in firelight scenes of moonlit woods and running wolves woven in gold thread. Furs and thick rugs softened the floors. A massive four-poster bed stood against the far wall, its linens dark as pine and impossibly soft. When the heavy door closed behind us, the sound echoed through my chest. We were alone, completely alone. Kael moved to the table where a decanter and 2 goblets waited. He poured the red liquid with quiet grace, the fire catching the wine until it glowed like blood. "Wine?" he asked, offering me a glass. "It may calm your nerves." I hesitated. "Is it?" I couldn't finish. He frowned slightly, a flash of hurt or annoyance crossing his face. "It's just wine, Arya. From your father's own vineyards." His tone softened. "I don't drug my wife." Heat rushed to my face. I accepted the goblet, careful not to touch his fingers, and took a sip. It was familiar, the same deep spiced wine served at my father's table. Warmth spread through me, though the fear in my stomach remained a knot of iron. Kael watched me over the rim of his glass. In the glow of the fire, his golden eyes seemed less predatory, more human. His formal jacket was gone, his white shirt clinging to a body built for battle, a dark tattoo curling up from his collar, something ancient and tribal. "You've barely spoken tonight," he said quietly. "Tell me what you're thinking." I gripped my glass tighter. "What would you have me say? That I'm honored, that I'm not terrified of what comes next?" "The truth," he said. "We're bound now. Lies won't help either of us." I laughed once, sharp, brittle. "The truth is that I was given to you like an offering. I know nothing about you except stories drenched in blood. I left everything behind, my home, my people, and now I'm expected to—" My eyes flicked toward the bed. I couldn't finish. Kael's gaze followed mine. Then, to my surprise, he stepped away toward the window. He pulled the curtains aside, and moonlight poured across him, turning his skin to silver in shadow. "What if I told you," he said quietly, "that I had no more choice in this than you did?" I froze. "What do you mean?" He turned then, the light cutting across his sharp features. "Kings don't always rule freely, Arya. Especially kings who inherit thrones built on centuries of blood." Kael turned back toward me, his tall frame outlined by the moonlight spilling through the window. "My council demanded this alliance," he said quietly. "Our people are tired. My warriors bleed for a war that never ends. I could fight until the last of us turned to ash, or I could bend." "And I was the cost of that surrender," I murmured. A flicker of gold burned through his eyes before dimming again. "No," he said. "You're not the price, Arya. You're the bridge." I set the goblet down, wrapping my arms around myself as a chill crept through me, despite the fire's warmth. "And now what happens now?" My voice trembled before I could stop it. Kael pushed away from the window and walked toward me, slow and deliberate, like someone approaching a frightened animal. My heart pounded, but I refused to step back. "Now," he said, stopping just out of reach, "we decide what comes next." "What do you mean?" I asked, confusion. Overtaking fear for a moment. The treaty required a marriage, he said evenly. That's done. What happens between us here is ours alone. He gestured toward a door half hidden behind a tapestry. Beyond that door are your private chambers. If you wish to rest there, you may. I will not force you to my bed. I stared at him, searching his face for any hint of deceit, and found none. But the treaty, I pressed. The consummation won't they expect? It's signed in blood, he cut in voice like steel. Your father's and mine. No one needs to know what happens behind these walls. A fragile spark of hope fluttered inside me. And when they demand an heir, I asked quietly, when your people expect you to take a true mate, one of your kind, rather than a human who flinches when you touch her. His jaw flexed, shadowed by his beard. That's tomorrow's concern. Tonight I'm offering you something neither of us has had in a long time choice. I studied him in the firelight, this Lycan king who defied every nightmare I had been told to believe. He stood there, powerful yet calm, the wildness in him, tempered by an almost painful patience. Why, I whispered, why show me this mercy? His expression softened barely. Because fear builds nothing that lasts, he said. And this peace has to last, Arya. Too many lives hang on it. He moved past me toward the main doors. His scent, pine, rain, and smoke brushed over me as he passed. The choice is yours, he said. I have matters to attend to. I'll return later. Then he was gone, leaving me in the golden silence of the chamber and the echo of his words. You don't have to fear me. I sat at the edge of the bed, my legs shaking. My mind spun, trying to find the hidden snare in his kindness. Surely it was a trick, some calculated test. But the relief that flooded through me at the thought of being spared tonight was so intense, it broke me open. I walked to the tapestry and found the small door. It opened easily, revealing a private room bathed in soft firelight, its own hearth, a small bed, and my belongings already unpacked. On the pillow lay a single white flower, delicate and luminous in the glow. The sight of it, the quiet thoughtfulness, undid me. Tears blurred my vision as I sank to my knees, clutching my mother, Celine's amulet. I cried for everything I had lost, everything I feared, and for the strange gentleness that made me question everything I thought I knew. When the tears finally ran dry, I wiped my face and moved mechanically, washing away the layers of paint and silk that no longer felt like mine. I changed into a simple nightdress and crawled into the unfamiliar bed. I should have felt relief, gratitude even. But instead, I felt weightless adrift in a world that suddenly didn't follow the script I'd been forced to memorize. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake listening to the new sounds of this castle, the distant wolves calling under the moon, the groan of stone, the sigh of wind through cracks unseen. Hours later I heard Kale return to the main room, the faint clink of metal, the low rustle of movement. Then silence, deep and steady, settled between us like the space between two worlds. Eventually silence settled over the rooms like a heavy cloak. Curiosity tugged at me until I rose from the bed and padded barefoot to the door connecting our chambers. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear nothing. Had Kale shifted into his other form to rest? Did Lycans even sleep as humans did? The question spiraled through my mind, followed by an ache I hadn't expected, something sharp and lonely. I was surrounded by strangers bound to a man who was half myth, half mystery. I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself wondering about the truth behind those molten gold eyes, about the man who had offered me mercy when he could have demanded obedience. Courage lives in stillness, my mother had said. Maybe tomorrow I would find the courage to really see him. Not the monster of legend, but whatever lay beneath the quiet power he carried. With that fragile thought, I finally drifted to sleep. My dreams hazy with flashes of golden eyes and the scent of pine after rain. When I woke, sunlight streamed across unfamiliar walls, disorienting in its brightness. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was until I saw the dark metal band on my finger, its moonstone glinting faintly in the light. the mark of a Lycan queen. Sitting up, I noticed a tray had been left near the window, fresh breadfruit, and a steaming pot of herbal tea. Someone had been here. The thought made my stomach twist. I dressed quickly in a soft blue gown laid neatly across a chair, another unseen kindness, and hesitated at the connecting door to Kayel's chamber. My hand hovered over the handle. Should I look in? Before I could decide, a knock sounded at the main door. "Enter," I called, stepping back. A young woman slipped in, graceful and quiet. Her eyes gleamed a soft amber, more honey than gold, and her dark hair was braided back to reveal the faint point of lichen ears. "My queen," she said, bowing slightly. "I am Nomi. His Majesty assigned me to help you adjust to your new home." "Oh," I said, startled by both the title and her composure. "Thank you, Nomi, but I can manage on my own." Her lips curved with polite amusement. "Of course, my lady. But the castle is vast, and our ways are different. His Majesty thought you might appreciate a guide." So Kyle had thought of that, of me. The realization unsettled something in my chest. "Where is the king this morning?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "He attended the Dawn Council," Nomi replied. "And now he meets with your father's delegation. The final treaty signatures must be completed before your people depart." "My people." The words lodged like a splinter. Soon my father would leave this place, and me with it. "I should be there," I said, suddenly moving toward the door. "If this is the final negotiation." "The king requests your presence in the South Garden when you're ready." Nomi interrupted gently. "He thought you might prefer to say goodbye to your family in private." Her words stilled me. Another kindness, another surprise. Kyle Nightwind was nothing like the beast I'd been told to fear. Every new revelation made him harder to define, neither enemy nor savior, but something in between. Nomi guided me through winding corridors of stone and living wood. She pointed out the grand library, the echoing great hall, the stairways that led to the training yards and kitchens. The castle was a strange harmony of human craft and wild design trees, grown into walls, sunlight spilling through skylights cut into rock. We passed guards and servants who bowed respectfully, but couldn't quite hide their curiosity. Their eyes followed me long after I passed. "They mean no harm," Nomi said softly, catching my unease. "They've seen human guests before, but never a human queen." "Do they resent it?" I asked, thinking of Riven's fury at the feast. Nomi hesitated. "Some are wary, others hopeful. The wars took much from both sides." She glanced at me. "But the king's word is absolute." I frowned. "Last night he said his council held influence." A shadow crossed her face. "The council advises," she said carefully. "The king decides. Still, even kings must sometimes yield to circumstance." We stopped before a set of tall glass doors. "The South Garden, my lady. Your father awaits with the king." The sight beyond stole my breath. The garden was a living mosaic of cultivated beauty and wild grace. Flowers intertwined with moss and fern lanterns, hanging from branches like captured stars. A narrow stream cut through the center, crossed by a curved wooden bridge. There, standing together on the bridge, were my father and Kyle. Cyrus Vale, dignified, weathered mortal. Kyle Nightwind, ageless strength, wrapped in human form, sunlight light catching in his dark hair. They spoke quietly, but Kyle's head turned sharply the moment I stepped into the garden. He didn't need to see me to know I was there. He already knew. "Arya," my father called, his voice warm with relief. "Come, child." I crossed the garden path toward him, feeling Kyle's gaze follow me like sunlight against my skin. When I reached the bridge, my father gathered me into a tight embrace. The familiar scent of leather and sage wrapped around me, grounding me in a way nothing else could. "Are you well?" he murmured against my hair, a simple question loaded with all the fear he wouldn't say aloud. "Yes," I whispered, keeping my answer short. I couldn't speak freely with Kyle standing so near. Cyrus pulled back to study my face. Whatever he saw seemed to ease him. He gave a small nod before turning to include Kyle in our small circle. "The treaties are signed and sealed," he said formally. "Our realms are now bound by oath and blood, and by marriage," Kyle added, his deep voice threading through the quiet air. "Your daughter will be honored as my queen and respected among my people." My father's hand tightened on my shoulder. "See that she is," he said, the warning clear beneath the calm. Kyle inclined his head solemnly. "You have my word. No harm will come to her while I draw breath." I realized then that it wasn't just a promise, it was an oath, the kind that carried weight in their world. I wondered what such vows meant to a Lycan whose nature was said to shift with every moonrise. "I'll leave you to your farewells," Kyle said quietly, his gaze brushing mine before he stepped away. He moved to the far edge of the garden, granting us privacy with a respect that unsettled me more than arrogance ever could. When we were alone, my father's composure faltered. The practiced mask of the statesman fell, revealing the worry beneath. "Arya, if you wish to come home, the alliance would crumble," I finished softly. "We both know I can't." He closed his eyes, the weight of a father and a king pressing on his shoulders. "How was last night?" he asked, hesitant, his voice almost fragile. "He was kind," I said, cheeks warming. "Not what I expected." Relief flooded his features. "Good. That's good." His gaze drifted toward Kyle, who stood a distance away speaking with a guard. "He's young by their measure, barely 30 winters. Yet he's brought unity after his father's brutal reign. His council respects him, even the elders." I soaked in every word. 30. Barely older than me, yet burdened with a kingdom's blood-stained legacy. "Why didn't you tell me these things before I asked?" "Would it have made this easier?" he countered gently. "Or would you have thought I was trying to soften the blow?" He knew me too well. I said nothing. "Here," he said quietly, pressing something small into my palm. It was a silver seal, the mark of his office. "This will make sure your letters reach me unopened. Tell me the truth of your life here, Arya. If you ever need me, if you're in danger, I will come for you. Alliance be damned." The fierce love in his voice made my throat tighten. I closed my fingers around the seal, like it was the last tether to the world I'd lost. "I'll write," I promised. "But I think I'm safer than we feared." Our farewell was brief but heavy. One last embrace, one whispered blessing, and he was gone, back straight, stride firm, every inch the ruler he'd taught me to be. I watched until the castle walls swallowed him whole. I didn't realize Kyle had returned until his low voice spoke from behind me. "It's never easy to watch family leave." I turned hastily, brushing tears from my cheeks. "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." He stood closer than I expected, sunlight cutting across the planes of his face. I truly saw him, the faint scars on his jaw, the flecks of amber in his golden eyes, the strands of blue-black in his hair where the light touched. "Thank you," I said, suddenly, surprising us both. "For last night. For giving me a choice." Something shifted in his expression, just enough to soften the edges of his face. "You're welcome, Arya," he said, my name rich and resonant in his voice. The sound stirred something deep inside me, a warmth I didn't want to name. I looked away. "Come," he said, gesturing to a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. "Sit with me. There are things you should understand about your new home." I followed, careful to keep a small distance between us as we sat close enough to hear the strength in his quiet voice, but far enough that my heart could still pretend it wasn't racing. The bench was broad enough to keep a careful distance between us. For a while, silence stretched steady, watchful, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the murmur of wind moving through the garden. "Ask what you wish," Kyle said at last, his tone calm, but edged with curiosity. "I know your mind must be full of questions." He wasn't wrong. Questions had haunted me from the moment I learned my fate, from the day I was promised to a king I'd never met. Yet now, faced with him in the morning light, I hesitated, unsure where to start. "Your people," I said, finally. What do they truly think of this alliance? Of me, Kael's gaze drifted beyond the garden walls to the forest beyond, shadows playing across his sharp features. They're divided, he admitted. The elders remember the time before war when our kinds traded even wed. But the younger ones were born into bloodshed. Riven isn't alone in his mistrust, but neither does he speak for all. The counsel that pressed for this marriage is practical. They've counted the graves the children lost, the homes burned. Even warriors tire of burying their young. I turned the wedding ring on my finger, watching the moonstone shift from white to blue in the sunlight. Last night, Lord Jarek represents the worst of humanity's hate toward us. Kael finished, his voice low steady. Just as Riven embodies the same in ours toward you. Both would sooner see peace shattered than power shared. You would have killed him, I said quietly, not as accusation but as truth. Yes, he said without pause, for wearing pieces of my kin as trophies. His golden eyes met mine. Does that frighten you? I thought of it carefully. The blunt honesty, the violence behind his calm. Yes, I said, but I understand it. If humans displayed the remains of Lycans in their halls, I imagine your wrath would be far greater. Something flickered across his face, a spark of surprise, maybe even respect. Perhaps you see more clearly than I expected. I was raised to be diplomatic, I replied. To see beyond my own perspective was part of my training alongside dancing and languages. Then perhaps your father chose better than he knew. Kael said. There was no mockery in his tone this time, only quiet respect. It made me uneasy. His approval felt heavier than his judgment ever could. Will I be expected to attend councils? I asked. To play a role beyond being your wife, Kael. Leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. What role would you want, Arya, if the choice were yours? No one had asked me that in months. I'd been moved like a pawn across a map, my future spoken for by men who never looked me in the eye. The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. To understand your people. To learn their customs, their history. If I'm to be queen, I should know those I'm meant to serve. A faint warmth touched his expression. That's wise. And yes, that role can be yours if you wish it. But it won't be easy. Some doors will stay closed until you earn their trust. Because I'm human, I said. Because you're new, he corrected. Trust is slow among my kind. We live long lives, and we remember longer. A question had been burning inside me since the night of the wedding. How long, I asked quietly. How long do your people live? He gave a short laugh, soft, almost wistful. We're not immortal, but we age slowly. 2 centuries, sometimes 3, for royal bloodlines. The words hit like a stone to the chest. 200 years. He would remain strong long after I was gone. Our marriage, meant to symbolize generations of peace, would be little more than a flicker in his lifetime. He must have seen the realization in my face. That troubles you, he said gently. It surprises me, I admitted. My voice was steadier than I felt. Children from such unions, he said, carry both bloodlines. They live longer than humans, though not as long as Lycans. They bridged 2 worlds. Children. I whispered the word, heavy between us. The thought made my stomach twist. I stood abruptly, needing to move, needing distance from the future, pressing too close. Kael stayed seated, patient, letting the silence breathe between us. You've given me a lot to think about, I said at last, stopping before him. He nodded slowly. We have time, Arya. Despite the council's demands, despite what both our peoples expect, whatever grows between us can take the shape it needs. There's no rush to define it. The breeze stirred the blossoms above us, scattering petals like soft snow around the bench. For the first time since my arrival, I realized he wasn't just offering peace between our worlds, he was offering it between us. The weight of his consideration settled over me, a quiet acknowledgement that whatever this relationship became would be built, not forced. Relief softened the tightness in my chest. "Thank you," I said again, genuine gratitude threading through my voice for his patience and restraint. A horn sounded from the direction of the castle. 3 short blasts, then 1 long tone. Kael rose instantly, his posture shifting to alert, predatory. "What is it?" I asked, tension creeping back in. "Visitors at the northern border," he replied already. Striding toward the castle, his long legs eating the distance. Unexpected ones. I hurried to keep pace, my heart picking up with each step. "Is it dangerous?" I ventured. He glanced at me, his expression shuddered, mask-like the same I had glimpsed during the wedding feast. "Return to your chambers, Arya," he commanded. "I should be present for matters of state," I said, hesitating only briefly. His gaze lingered unreadable before he gave a slight nod. "Very well, but stay close and speak only when spoken to. There are protocols you don't yet understand." The great hall had changed since the wedding. Gone were the decorations, the long tables. Now a massive circular stone carved with intricate runes dominated the space. Around it stood Kael's council. 7 Lycans of varying ages, and both genders, all radiating authority in formal attire. Their eyes lifted as we entered, surprise and subtle disapproval flickering across their faces. Kael's hand rested lightly on the small of my back, guiding me forward, a mix of possession and protection that sent a shiver racing down my spine. "My queen will join us," he announced, voice carrying unquestioned authority. "What news from the north?" A silver-streaked female stepped forward, auburn hair catching the light. "A pack of 30 seeks asylum." "Your Majesty," she said, tone careful. "Refugees or opportunists?" Kael asked sharply. "Both, I suspect," replied a muscular male with a scar pulling one eye into a permanent squint. "Their alpha claims human persecution beyond the Blackwood Mountains, but they bring warriors, not just families." Kael's expression remained neutral, though the tension in his body pressed into me where his hand still rested. The timing, just a day after our alliance, was suspicious. "They may be provocateurs," a younger council member said sharply. "We cannot risk turning away our own kind without hearing them," the silver-haired female interrupted. "That has never been our way, Darren. Nor will it be. Under my rule," Kael stated firmly. "Nomi, prepare the East Hall for the delegation Riven." His gaze found the Lycan warrior who had caused the disturbance at our wedding. "Choose 4 guards you trust to accompany the nomad representatives. Treat them as guests, but watch them closely." Riven inclined his head, expression. Neutral eyes flicking briefly to me. "What of the queen?" the silver-haired counselor asked. "Perhaps she should withdraw until we assess the situation." I spoke before Kael could answer. "If these Lycans have suffered at human hands, my presence might reassure them of our new alliance." My voice was careful, measured, yet my pulse raced at my own boldness. The council exchanged surprised glances. Kael pressed lightly against my back, a warning and encouragement I couldn't tell. "The queen makes a valid point," he said after a moment. "Her presence may serve multiple purposes." "Or provoke them," Riven countered. "If they have truly suffered, they'll see that not all humans are enemies." Kael's gaze swept to me, and I understood the reference to my own journey, from fear to understanding, silenced further objections. Orders were given, preparations made. Within the hour, we were ready to receive the nomad delegation in the East Hall, a smaller, more intimate space than the Great Hall, decorated with ancient weapons and pelts of non-Lycan beasts. Kael sat on a carved wooden chair, elevated on a dais, with me positioned slightly behind, and to his right our roles clear. The council formed a semicircle, formal, but not overtly threatening. "Observe more than you speak," Kael murmured as footsteps approached. "There is much you don't yet know about our politics." I nodded, smoothing my gown and straightening my posture. My training at my father Cyrus Vale's court would serve me well here. Observation, patience, and careful reading of the unspoken. The doors swung open to admit 5 Lycans flanked by Riven and his chosen guards. The contrast between the groups was striking. Kale's people wore attire that fused human tailoring with practical Lycan tradition, while the newcomers were clad in rough leather and hides adorned with painted symbols and stitched markings I couldn't recognize. Their leader stepped forward, a tall, broad-shouldered male with rust-colored hair, braided, intricately ritual scars tracing his forearms. His amber eyes, darker and more orange than Kale's, swept the room before settling on the king with a mix of respect and fatigue. "Your Majesty," he said, placing his fist over his heart in what I assumed was a customary greeting. "I am Kian Alpha of the Moonstone Pack. We seek refuge in your territory and the protection of your rule." Kale inclined his head slightly. "You claim to flee human persecution," he said, voice calm, but edged with suspicion. "Yet you arrive the day after I sign a peace treaty with the human kingdom. Explain your timing." Kian's jaw tightened. "We've been traveling for weeks, sire. The mountains are treacherous this season, and we have cubs among us." His gaze flicked briefly to me, surprise crossing his features. "We come from beyond the eastern settlements. 3 moons ago, a new leader rose among them, a hunter who has made a name for himself killing our kind. He calls himself the Purifier." Murmurs rippled through the council. I recognized the implications immediately. My father had warned of a radical faction forming in the eastern provinces led by a zealous figure, preaching the eradication of Lycans for human security. "Lord Kael." I spoke softly, stepping forward. All eyes turned to me and Kael's attention sharpened. "Reports indicate such a man exists in the eastern territories. My father sent envoys." Kian continued, "But the region is remote, difficult to govern, and—" His amber eyes widened slightly. "You keep a human as consort." "This is Queen Arya." Kael corrected, voice carrying a sharp edge. "My wife. Partner in the alliance between our kingdoms. You will show her the respect her station commands." The Alpha looked genuinely taken aback, reassessing us both. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. We were unaware of such progressive developments." "The alliance is new," Kael replied firm. "But if your account is true, it represents exactly the aggression our treaty aims to prevent." Kian drew himself taller. "This Purifier has assembled an army humans who lost family in the wars or simply hate our kind. They hunt in coordinated groups using silver weapons and fire. We lost 7 pack members before fleeing." He said, his voice rough with emotion, "including 2 cubs." My chest tightened. "Children." Kyle's expression hardened to stone. "Do you have evidence of these attacks?" "Witnesses outside your pack." Kian nodded. "Others fled north, hoping the mountains would shield them. And we brought this." He gestured and a companion stepped forward, unwrapping a cloth bundle to reveal a crossbow bolt unlike any I had seen. The shaft bore etched symbols, the head formed of silvery metal with cruel barbs. Sarah studied it grimly, noting the grooves filled with wolf's bane resin. "A weapon designed specifically to kill our kind," she said. Kale's eyes met mine briefly, a silent understanding passing between us. This Purifier embodied the hatred our union was meant to temper. If these attacks were real, the Alliance faced its first test sooner than anticipated. "You and your pack will be assigned temporary quarters in the Western Forest Settlement," Kale decided. "Food, medical care, and protection will be provided. In return, you will submit to our laws and the authority of my appointed representatives." Relief softened Kian's features. "Thank you, Your Majesty. We ask nothing beyond safety for our young and a chance to serve your kingdom." "Your gratitude is noted," Kyle said formally. Voice calm, but carrying undeniable threat. "Should I discover any deception or misrepresentation, the consequences will be severe. The peace of my kingdom is not to be trifled with, especially now." I watched Kian closely, searching for deceit or resentment. He bowed his head in full acceptance. Riven will see to your immediate needs. Kale concluded, his hand briefly resting on my back, a subtle reminder of both protection and authority. The council dismissed, though I knew I would speak with Saris and Darren privately. Kyle's hand brushed lightly against my elbow. My queen will join us, he said, and I felt the subtle weight of his attention. As the others filed out, Kion's amber gaze lingered on me, curious and unguarded. I met his eyes steadily, refusing to appear intimidated. Whatever judgments he was forming about a human queen in a Lycan court, I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing weakness. Once the hall emptied, leaving only the four of us, Kael's posture loosened slightly from its rigid formality. "Speak freely," he said to the two counselors. "What do you make of this Saris?" The silver-haired female answered first. "The weapon is genuine. Those markings come from the eastern human settlements. Their style is unmistakable." Darren's youthful features hardened with suspicion. "The timing is troubling. The day after our king takes a human bride, humans are murdering Lycan cubs. Too convenient." "Or precisely why this alliance is necessary," Saris countered. "Those eastern settlements have always been more radical, less influenced by Cyrus Vale's control." I listened carefully, noting the respect in their words for my father, yet also the acknowledgement of the limits of his reach. My training in diplomacy urged caution, but I found my voice. "May I asked, glancing at Kael. When he inclined his head, I continued. "The eastern territories are isolated, suspicious of outsiders, even of other humans. If this purifier has gained influence, there my father's intelligence networks may not detect it immediately." Darren's amber eyes narrowed. "Convenient explanation, my queen," he said. "No," I interrupted, lifting my hand slightly. "Let him speak. Suspicion works both ways." A flicker of surprised respect crossed Darren's face. This could be a test of our new alliance, seeing if the king will protect his human wife's people over his own kind. Or it could be exactly what it appears Saris said. Desperate refugees fleeing persecution. Or both. Kael's expression darkened. A genuine crisis, perhaps manipulated for political purposes. "Arya, what do you suggest?" His directness caught me off guard, standing as it did before his council. I realized then, this was my first true test as queen. "Verify independently," I said after a moment's thought. "Send scouts east not only to confirm the refugees' story, but to assess the scale of the threat. Meanwhile, notify my father. If this purifier operates within his realm, he must be informed." "And the refugees," Kael prompted. "House them as promised, but apart from established settlements," I said. "Provide for their needs, but maintain observation. If their intentions are pure, they deserve protection. If not—" I let the thought hang, unwilling to suggest punishment when I was still learning the balance of justice in this world. Kael nodded satisfaction, softening his gaze. "Exactly my thoughts, Saris. Select scouts, experienced ones who can move undetected in human territories, Darren. You'll oversee the refugees' settlement and security." The young counselor looked poised to protest, but reconsidered quickly. Kael continued, "I will draft communications to Cyrus Vale. Arya, your insight into your father's court will be invaluable." After the council members departed, the East Hall settled into quiet. For a moment, we were alone. Kael moved to a side table where a decanter and cups waited, a constant in his meeting rooms, I noticed. "You handled that well," he said, pouring 2 drinks. "Better than many would on their first council encounter." I accepted the cup he offered, our fingers brushing briefly. The contact no longer sent the old jolt of alarm through me. "I've been trained in diplomacy since childhood," I said, softly. "This was more than training," Kael observed. "You showed wisdom and restraint when Darren challenged you. Many would have reacted with defense or aggression." I sipped the drink, herbal warming rather than wine. My father had taught me that defensive reactions rarely serve in negotiations. Kael leaned against the table, golden eyes piercing mine. Your father taught you well, though I suspect some of that wisdom is inherently yours. The compliment warmed me more than the drink ever could. Thank you for including me, I said softly, for not sequestering me away from matters of governance. That would waste your abilities, Cale replied simply. And counterproductive to what we're trying to build, he added. And what exactly are we building? I asked, emboldened by his openness. His gaze turned thoughtful, something new flickering across his features. Something neither of our kinds has seen before, he said slowly. A true partnership between human and Lycan, not merely coexistence, but cooperation. He set his cup down. It won't be easy. Today is only the first challenge of many. I thought of Kian and his nomads, of the mysterious purifier, of the suspicious glances humans and Lycans alike had cast my way when I appeared at Kael's side. No, I agreed softly. It won't be easy. But perhaps, he continued, his voice dropping to a register that resonated deep in my chest, it will be worth the struggle. The intensity in his golden eyes made me look away first. I should help you draft that letter to my father, I offered. His lips curved slightly. Yes, we should begin immediately. The following weeks passed in a blur, new routines, unexpected discoveries. Morning council sessions where I observed more than spoke, learning the subtle rhythms of Lycan governance. Afternoons exploring the castle and surrounding grounds, always with Nomi guiding me, a subtle guard at my side. Evenings with Cale, sometimes discussing matters of state, sometimes sharing quiet moments in his study, while I read from his extensive library. Each night I retired to my own chamber. Our arrangement remained, yet its meaning shifted. What had begun as careful distance now felt like a space for something to grow. Trust, understanding, perhaps something deeper. The Moonstone Lycans settled into their assigned territory, gratitude evident, though Kian's reports showed they remained insular, mingling little with Kael's established packs. The scouts had not returned from the east, and my father's reply to our missive reflected concern, but limited knowledge of the purifier. I adapted faster than I expected. Strange foods became familiar, the castle's twisting passages, navigable Lycan customs less foreign. Unexpected allies emerged within the council. Ceres had taken me under her wing, teaching me traditions and history with grandmotherly patience. Even Riven had softened, slightly impressed when I inquired about the training of young warriors, asking thoughtful questions about defensive techniques. It was a full moon night that changed everything. I had been warned the castle would be nearly empty. Most Lycans preferred to roam free under the full moon, even those in human form joining the traditional hunt, a night of pack bonding and primal expression closed to outsiders. Will you transform as well? I asked Kael that morning over breakfast, a new routine forming. He hesitated. Yes. The king leads the hunt. I nodded, trying to hide the disappointment of another evening alone. I understand. Do you? He asked, golden eyes searching my face. What do you understand of the full moon and its meaning to us? I faltered under his gaze. Only what stories tell that the pull is stronger, the change more complete, I admitted. It is more than physical transformation, he explained. It is communion with our deepest nature, a reminder of who and what we are, beneath the trappings of civilization. His words stirred my curiosity, though I knew better than to ask to witness it. Some boundaries remained uncrossed. Now, as twilight deepened into night, I stood on my balcony, watching the full moon rise over the forest. A perfect silver disk cast ghostly light, and distant howls echoed from the woods, beautiful haunting, stirring goosebumps along my arms. The Lycans celebrated their true nature beneath the governing light. A soft knock at my door startled me. Opening it, I found Nomi expression unusually solemn. My queen, she said, bowing slightly. The king requests your presence in the northern courtyard. Surprise and confusion fluttered through me. Now but the hunt. It has been postponed for an hour, she finished. Please come quickly. I followed her through empty corridors, curiosity mounting with every step. The northern courtyard was secluded, visited only once before a stone-walled garden, with a clear view of the distant mountains. Kael waited there alone, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlight, clad in a simple black tunic and leggings, feet bare against the stone. His hair fell loose around his shoulders as he turned to face me, and my breath caught. His eyes glowed with a fire I had never seen, gold now rimmed with a deep reddish hue. Nomi melted silently into the shadows, leaving us alone in the silvered moonlight of the courtyard. Arya Kael's voice was deeper, rougher than usual. "Thank you for coming," I said, stepping closer, drawn by a force I couldn't name. "Why was the hunt postponed?" I asked. "Because there is something I wish to show you first," he replied, extending his hand. "Something I want you to understand about me, about us before we go further on this journey together." I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand in his. His skin was hotter than usual, his grip careful, aware of his strength. The stories humans told about Lycans focused on violence, loss of control, bloodlust. "Some of that is true," he said quietly, "for the young, for the untrained. But for those born to this power, the shift is not loss, it's expansion. Not madness, but clarity." I swallowed, understanding what he was offering. "You want to show me your other form?" I asked. "I want you to see me, all of me," he corrected, fingers tightening slightly around mine. "Without fear, without misunderstanding, but only if you wish. Choice, always choice." The respect in that gesture moved me deeply. "Yes," I whispered. "Then watch," he said, releasing my hand and stepping to the center of the courtyard, where moonlight pooled like liquid silver. For a moment he stood still, face lifted toward the moon. Reverence and joy transforming his features. Then his eyes closed. The change began, subtly. Skin rippled, breath deepened, and came the low resonant growl, not of agony, but from the earth itself. His body elongated, muscles swelling and reforming beneath midnight black fur streaked with silver. The transformation was both beautiful and terrifying, a fluid metamorphosis. Not the violent horror of legend, but like watching a master sculptor reshape marble. Where Kael had stood now crouched a massive wolf-like creature, larger than any natural wolf limbs, powerful eyes golden and intelligent, undeniably him. I froze, heart racing, not with terror but awe. He stayed still, allowing me to reconcile this form with the man I had come to know. Slowly I stepped forward, hand raised. "May I?" He lowered his great head. My fingers sank into fur softer than I imagined, warm, alive. A rumble vibrated through him, not a warning, but contentment. "You're beautiful," I whispered, and meant it. Something shifted in his golden gaze, surprise, perhaps gratitude. Slowly he leaned forward, forehead resting gently against mine, a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In that moment, I understood what he had tried to convey since our wedding night. "You don't have to fear me." Not because he would hide his nature, but because his nature complex, powerful, wild, offered me safety and partnership. Lycan and man were one, choosing to trust me. As we stood beneath the moon that had once symbolized my greatest fear, I realized the truth that had grown over weeks. This arranged marriage, this political alliance, had the potential to become something true, lasting, built on respect, affection, and choice, rather than obligation. When Kael shifted back to human form, I stayed close, unafraid. Vulnerable in transformation, yet immeasurably powerful, his golden eyes sought mine. I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "Thank you," I said simply, "for trusting me with this." His rare, genuine smile transformed his face. "Trust goes both ways, my queen," he said. Later that night, after the castle had grown silent following the hunter's return, I left my chamber, crossed to the connecting door, and knocked softly. Kael opened it, surprise flickering across his features. I stepped forward into his embrace. Our journey had only begun, paths fraught with challenges from both our worlds. But as his arms encircled me, as my heart beat against his, I knew we would face them together, not as human and Lycan, not as political allies, but as partners who had chosen each other against every reason to remain apart. "You don't have to fear me," he had whispered on our wedding night, and now finally completely, I didn't.